If you've seen my previous videos, you know how much I was looking forward for this week at the Academy, but it didn't go exactly as planned. Hi, I'm Kateryna. I put my corporate career on hold and started an art academy at 30. Every week, I share my artistic journey, the real challenges, breakthroughs, and lessons I learned along the way. Welcome to my channel. This week at the Academy, we finally had a model posing for us after 2 weeks without one. I was really looking forward to it. The model will keep the same pose in the morning for 2 weeks, and it will change the pose in the afternoon that it will keep for 2 weeks as well. After finishing my first academic painting, I couldn't wait to create something from life again, and I was so ready for a fantastic week ahead. However, the week started on the wrong foot. On Monday, we usually set up the poses for the 2 weeks ahead, and this time the morning pose was amazing. It was a back pose, which was perfect since I'm trying to understand the anatomy of the back. It was also a pose that reminded me the classical paintings. I was really inspired by that. I actually love this kind of poses. But the problem came in the afternoon. The pose that had been chosen was an equally beautiful pose. It was a seated pose, this time a front pose. The model held a beautiful diagonal line. He was laying on an arm with his legs open and crossed in front of him. It was a very beautiful pose, but the problem came with that right arm on which the model was putting its weight. It's a really hard pose to keep for a while because at some point the arm really starts hurting. And the other thing is that the model was sitting on some cushions that kept moving. So after the first 20-minute sessions, I realized that the pose was gonna change a lot every time we were restarting. And indeed, that was the case. And my goal of doing a well-finished drawing died there. Every time I tried to check the vertical lines or the shadow shapes, something had shifted. I got so frustrated, I just wanted to go home. I couldn't imagine myself spending 2 weeks with a pose that was changing every 20 minutes. I was getting really angry, really frustrated, really unmotivated. The teachers, as usual, were very kind and came to me explaining that the model is actually not a statue and that we need to learn to reinterpret the pose and keep going. That's what the other students were doing. But for me, it was the first time facing that challenge, and I felt I just couldn't handle it. I fell into a dark rabbit hole of frustration, one of those where the only solution you see is just giving up. I hadn't felt that level of frustration in a while, and when I get there, my mind just shuts down. So after 2 hours of trying to draw that pose, I literally gave up with trying, but I didn't go home. At least I stayed to make a quick sketch of the portrait of the model because, you know, when you only draw the head, at least you don't have to align it with the rest of the body. So it was a quick way to lift myself up. The next day, even the morning pose changed and all the frustration came back. I still decided to give it a chance since the structure of the drawing was already more solid, and I started by focusing on the legs, which were the only part that stayed the same since the previous day. And by working on that, I actually slowly found the courage to start working on the back and the upper part of the torso as well. But there was nothing to do with the afternoon pose, not even on the second day. I tried to help the model to find the same exact pose from the previous day, but for as much as we tried, we couldn't manage it. Something was always off. So for the afternoon pose, I just decided to focus on the portrait. I felt a bit defeated, but it was a good compromise at least. Later that day, we had an amazing seminar called The System of Art with an art critic, galleries, and also journalists writing about art. We talked about galleries, what they look for, how they work, how artists can approach them, and I found it so inspiring and full of practical advice. I was so grateful for that seminar because it reminded me how lucky I am to study in such a place. I don't think we should give for granted that an art academy would give a seminar like that. Actually, I don't think that all the art academies teach artists how to live in that real world, you know? But I think it's extremely useful because sometimes we isolate in our artistic bubble, but at the end, we need to make a living out of that. So when I thought about that, I was like, why am I even so frustrated? I'm in such an amazing place with great teachers, great professionals. I'm not just stuck in here with my frustration, but I'm here to overcome frustration, learn how to face it. If I were working alone at home, I would have probably given up. But here I'm forced to find creative solution. And you know, that discomfort is what triggers progress. Because when you don't give up, you keep practicing, and every minute spent practice is progress. Micro progress that you might not notice right away, but that proves you can show up even when things get hard. That's why so many people give up early. We tend to forget that our favorite artists, the ones we admire the most, they all went through a learning phase. They all faced the same frustration, but they didn't stop creating. Doing art today can be especially frustrating. With social media, we tend to see a lot of amazing artists with amazing art, but we rarely see the ugly sketches, the failed studies, the learning process behind it. And that's exactly why I make this vlog, because learning art is a long journey and it's mostly psychological and personal. My mentor once mentioned a beautiful interview by David Bowie that I'm gonna link here in the description. He said that you should always stay a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Everything that feels difficult or uncomfortable is a step forward in your growth. Never forget that you decided to show up because there's something inside you that wants this. You shouldn't be here just to create something beautiful to show others. You should be here for yourself. That's the mistake I made at the beginning of the week. I was pressuring myself to create something beautiful, and maybe I'm also really influenced by the fact that I make these videos and I show every week what I produce, so probably I was a little bit pressured on producing something worth showing here. But frustration means you're facing something new, a challenges that will lead you to improvement. And I really believe that the difference between someone who improves and someone who gives up is not talent, it's just perseverance. And often progress in art is very slow. But just look back at your older drawings, how much progress you made so far. That's why at the Academy we keep a big sketchbook where we keep doing our quick sketches, and teachers usually remind us to go back and look at what we did months before and how far we improved, what we improved, and what are the next steps we need to focus on. You know, the only failed drawing is the one you've never made. Everything else is progress, and I arrive to believe that. And I always forget to allow myself to make mistakes. Sometimes I'm really too hard on myself. But making something ugly doesn't mean we are untalented. It means we are learning. You don't have to draw perfectly, especially when you're learning. You just need to show up. A beautiful book I always recommend by Julia Cameron that's called The Artist Way invites us to imagine ourselves as little child who are becoming artists. If we saw that child making art, learning art for the first time and seeing their ugly drawings, would we be judging him? Would we tell him to give up? Would we be hard on him? Probably not. So that's how we should treat ourselves and our learning journey. I think that metaphor really explains well what we go through when we are into a learning journey, and I always have to remind myself about that. Inside of all of us, there is a little child artist who's just learning, so let's not be hard with him or her. By the end of the week, these are the two drawings that I came up with, the morning pose and the afternoon portrait. What do you think about that? I see a lot of things to improve, but I also see a lot of progress when I look back at what I was doing just a few weeks ago. And also I'm ending the week in a great mood. If this video has helped you or motivated a little bit, consider liking it and leaving a comment by telling me what was the last time you really felt frustrated with drawing or doing art or learning. I'm pretty sure that filling the comment section with our experience, we'll all feel less depressed about it, and we'll find that all of us have gone through common experiences. It will be comforting and maybe even cathartic putting our frustrations out there. Remember, learning something meaningful, art, writing, music, takes time and perseverance. I believe in you and I believe in myself, so we can do it.